It was one of those quiet Sunday afternoons in Savannah, Georgia, the kind that wraps you in warmth. The magnolia trees were in bloom, their scent dancing on the breeze as I sat on my porch, sipping sweet tea and enjoying the hush of the day. That's when my phone rang. It was my sister, Amanda. "Hey," she said, slightly out of breath. "Can you watch Ryan for the weekend? I got pulled into a last-minute trip. I owe you." I didn't hesitate. "Of course," I said. It had been almost a year since I'd last seen Ryan. Back then, he was still that thoughtful teen, soft-spoken, polite, always helping with the groceries and texting his mom if he'd be late. When he arrived that evening, I noticed the change immediately. He was taller, his voice deeper, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence. But his hug? Still as warm and sincere as ever. "Thanks for having me, Aunt Claire," he said, and I smiled. Some things, thankfully, hadn't changed. That night we made his favorite spaghetti. We talked about school, music, and what he'd been watching. Then we settled on the couch for one of those old crime shows we both used to binge. By the time the third episode ended, night had fallen and the house felt still. Then he turned to me. "Aunt Claire," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "Can I ask you something kind of personal?" I muted the TV and gave him my full attention. "Of course." He looked down, fidgeting with his hands. "I don't really know who else to talk to. It's kind of embarrassing." "Whatever it is," I said gently, "you can tell me." And he did. He talked about school, about a girl he liked who didn't seem to notice him. He told me how his friends teased him for never having dated anyone, how he felt this pressure to act like he had it all figured out when he really didn't. He felt like he couldn't show vulnerability without seeming weak. I just listened. Then I shared a few of my own awkward stories, things I'd usually never admit. He laughed. And for the first time that night, I saw the tension leave his shoulders. Later, as I was setting up the guest room, I heard a quiet knock. "Aunt Claire," he said, standing in the doorway. "Would it be weird if I stayed in your room tonight? Like when I was younger?" It caught me off guard. He was nearly grown. But in his eyes, I saw something familiar, a small, unspoken need to feel safe. "Of course, honey," I said, "just like old times." He lay on one side of the bed, I lay on the other. The room was still. I could hear his breathing slow as sleep took over. And in that moment, I realized something. Teenagers like Ryan are under so much pressure. To be strong, to be cool, too. Always perform. And yet, very few places offer them the chance to just be. The next morning, I made pancakes. He sat at the counter, scrolling on his phone, looking more at ease. "Thanks for last night," he said softly. "Anytime," I replied and meant it. Later, we took a walk through the park. He told me he wanted to study marine biology. That? He dreamed of seeing the ocean, of doing something that mattered. I felt a quiet swell of pride. Sunday came too fast. Amanda pulled up looking tired but grateful. She hugged me, ruffled Ryan's hair. "So, how was the weekend?" Ryan shrugged. "It was good. Aunt Claire's cool." When they left, I went back to the porch, letting the memories of the weekend settle in. No big events. No dramatic revelations. Just honesty, connection, a young man opening up, and an adult who happened to be there to listen. Since then, Ryan still calls sometimes. We talk about school, books, life. And every time he does, I remember how much that weekend meant, not just to him, but to me too. Weeks passed. Life returned to its usual rhythm, but sometimes I'd glance at the guest room or past the spot on the couch where we sat, and think of Ryan, not the shy boy I used to babysit, but the young man growing into something more. Then one evening my phone buzzed. "Aunt Claire, you got a minute?" We ended up talking for over an hour. He told me about a marine science club he was thinking of joining, something he never would have dared try before. He spoke about a new teacher who believed in him, and even a girl he'd started texting, nothing serious, but enough to make him smile when he said her name. And as we talked, I realized this had become our new normal. These small, consistent check-ins. These quiet windows where I got to witness someone stepping into their future, and something changed in me. 2. I started noticing teenagers more, especially the quiet ones. At the grocery store, at church. I started volunteering at a local youth center once a month. Nothing huge, just helping with college prep, organizing workshops, or sometimes just being someone who listens. Not all of them opened up, but some did. And each time I thought of Ryan. Then one afternoon, months later, he called again. But this time, his voice was shaking. "I messed up," he said. He told me about a blowout with Amanda, about pressure, grades, curfews. He'd slammed a door, said things he didn't mean. And now, he didn't feel like himself. "Everyone acts like I'm supposed to have it all together," he said. "Like I'm not allowed to mess up." I let him talk. I didn't interrupt or offer solutions. I just listened. When he finally paused, I said, "Ryan, growing up isn't about being perfect. It's about learning how to recover when you're not. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you're struggling." There was silence. Then, "Thanks, Aunt Claire. I needed to hear that." Later that night, Amanda texted me. "Thanks for talking to him. He really listens to you." I told her the truth. I don't have all the answers. I'm just someone who picks up the phone when it rings. By the time Ryan graduated high school, he'd been accepted into a university with a top marine biology program. When he got the acceptance email, he sent me a screenshot with just one line, "I made it. You were right. I found my ocean." I cried. That summer, before he moved out of state, we had dinner one last time on the porch. He looked older, grounded, but the light in his eyes was still the same. "Do you remember that weekend?" I asked. He laughed. "You mean when I asked to sleep in your bed at 17? We both chuckled. "I remember more than that," he said. "I remember feeling like I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did, like I mattered." "You've always mattered," I told him. "You just needed someone to remind you." Now, years later, he's in his final year of college. He's traveled, interned with conservation groups, and even mentors younger students' kids who remind him of himself. And he still calls me Aunt Claire with that same warmth in his voice. Sometimes I look back and wonder, what if Amanda hadn't called that Sunday? What if I'd said I was too busy? I would have missed everything. I would have missed watching a boy find his place in the world. Missed being someone he could trust. Now, whenever I get asked to do a small favor, no matter how small, I stop and think, this might be the start of something I'll never forget. Because sometimes all it takes is a weekend, an open heart, and the courage to say yes.